We are back with another episode of Erotically Empowered, where, of course, we discuss all things pleasure, intimacy, feminine power, and unapologetic confidence. I am your host, Ali Gamolka. Now, today's episode was meant to be something completely different. I had a completely different topic laid out that I was going to talk about, and I will obviously still talk about that in the coming weeks. But I had a TikTok question from a woman in my community who asked me to speak about the orgasm gap. And I finally jumped on there today and, answered her question and started talking about it. And my God, it was coming through me and it was just bubbling up. And I was like, oh, I want to keep talking. I want to keep talking. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this an entire podcast episode. So here we are. I am all about following soul, honoring what's coming through, and to be expressed and spoken. So I'm honoring that, and I ditched the other topic, and here we are. So I feel like the orgasm gap, like just that statement in itself, has kind of become a bit of a trend online, and I feel like, now don't hate me here, although I'm sure if you are here listening or watching, you pretty much already know my views around pleasure and you're somewhat aligned. But I do feel that in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, it has become a way of blaming the men, continuing to blame the men for not giving the women, giving us the pleasure that we desire. Now, while I acknowledge that, yes, there are men who have zero, education on how to connect to a woman's body and have zero desire or willingness to learn, because let's face it, most of us, were not born and raised with this education around connecting to bodies, and so it's very fair for men to be uneducated in this area. However, if you pair that with an unwillingness to actually learn and grow and evolve, then that's the issue. So while I fully acknowledge there are these men and they don't prioritize connection to a woman. They do not prioritize pleasure, a woman's pleasure, and therefore the woman, is unfulfilled. She's faking it. She's pretending. All of this. Yes, that is true. But if you know my views at all by now, which can be a bit controversial, I am going to sit here and come back to this is on the woman. This is on the woman. Why? Because if a woman is choosing herself, if she is, and I'm going to go into the rest of the stuff, the contributing factors, but back down to this, if she is choosing herself, if she is worshipping the F out of her body and devoting herself daily to her body, to her pleasure, to the goddess that she is, do you think that that kind of woman is going to attract, let alone allow, that kind of man to connect to her, let alone, God forbid, continue connecting to her in that way? Like, let's say, she didn't feel the intuition and the intuitive signs, and, she may have slept with this sort of a man. Do you honestly think that a woman who is so deeply in devotion to herself and her pleasure is going to allow that to continue happening? No. Do you think she's then going to go online saying the orgasm gap, these men, they don't care to please us? No. The women who are in full devotion to themselves and fully showing up every day as this freaking turned on orgasmic queen that she is, because she chooses herself every day and she chooses to be this person, she is not going to attract or accept that sort of a man. If you are continuing to attract men who do not prioritize your pleasure and are not willing to grow in this area, because like I said, it's okay if they perhaps don't know and, they're still learning, but they have to have a willingness to grow, right? Those are the sort of men that a queen who stands fully for her body, she is going to attract the men who are willing to grow. She's not going to attract a man who does not prioritize connecting to her in this way. So that ultimately comes down to the woman. Okay, that's my first little step. And if we go back to the episode, I don't know which one it was, but where I was talking about owning your pleasure, this is just the whole premise of that you are the freaking queen. You are the flower who attracts the bees as the feminine. You are the flower. You can choose who you attract into your space by how you choose you, how you interact with you, how you connect to you. Okay. Now, the other big thing with the orgasm gap that is often spoken about is intimacy is quite male focused. Okay, in that, they'll say that it's very penetration based. Perhaps if the woman's lucky, she'll get a bit of foreplay and then it's, penis in vagina until he comes, boom, done. So this is the statement for that. And, people will go on to say that majority of women need clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm, and this is being neglected. Now, let's unpack this. Yes, I agree to an extent. I agree with most women currently need clitoral stimulation, and that is being ignored by a lot of men. First and foremost, they're attracting those men. They're attracting the men that are just ignoring the woman's pleasure. But a woman, okay, I'm trying to figure out how to say this without being too triggering, but who am I kidding? What I speak about is, of course, going to trigger, and that's okay, because sometimes it's in the triggering that will either have you go in the other direction, or it'll call you for more and wake you up to the truth of what you know, because you're resonating with this. You already know. But if a woman now there's nothing wrong with clitoral-based pleasure. My God, the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings for a reason, for us to enjoy. My God. However, the amount of women that I work with, this is my work, is mostly women who are dependent on either, high-powered toys or intense clitoral friction and one particular way to come, who aren't satisfied. So, of course, there is nothing wrong with clitoral stimulation. Like I said, this is the, most sensitive part. It's incredible we've been gifted this. However, so many women do feel unsatisfied because they want to feel more. They want to feel, and this was me, they want to feel pleasure via penetration. They want it to feel so good when he is inside her, not just when the delicious bean is being flicked. And that is up to the woman. It is up to the woman, not the man, to awaken her, to awaken herself beyond just that one incredible spot, sensitive spot, to awaken her body, her pussy, her erotic energy, the fire between her legs, in her heart, in her body, in every cell of her being. It is up to the woman to open herself so she no longer relies on one particular way. She no longer feels that there is only one way that I can orgasm during intimacy and it has to happen in this exact way. Like, who wants that? Certainly not me. Certainly not me. And you'll hear all online that, and I've copped flack for it before, of course, saying, you shouldn't be, putting down women's way of experience pleasure. I am not. I am absolutely not. If you are okay with just clitoral stimulation to get off, you enjoy it. Like I am a stand for everyone experiencing pleasure as long as it's consensual in the ways that they desire. But I am more of a stand for a woman feeling empowered in her pleasure. And the amount of women who do not feel empowered relying on one particular way and who want to feel their orgasm during penetration, the amount of women is just, it's through the roof. So this is why you'll never shut me up about this stuff. But that is up to the woman. If you haven't awakened your body and you are only relying on that super sensitive location in the body because it is super sensitive. So that was always the easiest way for, you to connect, and then you just stuck there and ignored everything else. So now you don't feel anything during penetration. So then sex is, limited unless you're having the clitoral stimulation. That is on you to awaken that. And I say this to empower you. If you are not having the sex that you want, if you are not feeling your orgasm freely, if you are feeling restricted in your pleasure in whatever way that is, you get to change that. You get to connect in a different way. You get to reclaim your pleasure. You get to expand your pleasure. But it begins with you. And you can sit here until the cows come home saying there's an orgasm gap because men aren't prioritizing women's pleasure. You can say that till the cows come home, but you're just keeping yourself stuck. You're just keeping yourself stuck because you're talking to the men who don't give a shit. You're talking to, those men who don't care to connect to you are not going to change because you're shouting this out. I don't know, maybe they will, maybe some will, but that's not the men that you want to be talking to. You want to be attracting and magnetizing the men who go into intimacy as this shared experience where they want to connect to your body in the ways that you desire. They want to create this depth of intimacy with you, but you've got to begin. You've got to get that ball rolling by you awakening you. You cannot rely on somebody else to awaken you. What you go into intimacy with, if you go into intimacy as someone who struggles with pleasure and can only, orgasm in one particular way and struggles to stay in your body longer than a 2-minute quickie with a toy, how do you expect you're going to create this magic during intimacy and experience this kind of magic? It is up to you. So, yes, men need to be more educated, and there are some incredible male sex and pleasure educators that I've come across online that I just look at and am in awe and go, yes, like this is the work that men need to know. And the men that you want to be attracting are the men who are open to listening to that. And they're in those comments going, yeah, I'm fully here, open and listening. Maybe not necessarily in the comments, but you know what I mean. The men who are wanting to learn and grow. But you have to acknowledge if we at all want this orgasm gap closed, yes, we need the male education, but we need more women to rise into their true state of pleasure, their full state of pleasure. We need more women to reclaim their pleasure for themselves. We need more women to be devoted to themselves, you need to be in full devotion to yourself. You need to choose yourself. If you want to be closing this orgasm gap and be experiencing the kind of intimacy where you both feel the magic, you've got to take ownership of that. You've got to be in such a devotion to yourself and your pleasure and your body and your pussy every single day that you just simply wouldn't even attract or allow to stay in your vicinity a man who doesn't meet that, a man who doesn't honor those standards that you already have conditioned yourself for. The orgasm gap exists because of this lack of education, not just for men, but for women. For us never being taught to prioritize our own pleasure. For us women never being taught how to connect to our own body outside of a powered toy. And this whole movement of powered toys being empowering, yes, great, empowering, but also women want more. You know, women, most women, probably you if you're watching this, want to feel connected to their orgasm during penetration, during the whole, experience of intimacy. There's such a disconnect here between a woman and what she truly wants to feel. There's such a disconnect for what needs to happen here, and that is the woman taking ownership and choosing every day to be in full devotion to herself. Like, when was the last time you sat there and spread your legs and looked at your beautiful divine portal with admiration? Like, how does that even make you feel when you hear me say this? It can be triggering, and I totally get that. You all know that, this was triggering for me, the mirror work in the beginning. But if you're never going to acknowledge, and that shame, that's another contributing factor to the orgasm gap. Let's go there. This shame around that us women hold around our own freaking bodies, our own body. Like, you were born with this. I was born with this, and yet I'm ashamed to look at it in the mirror. I'm ashamed to touch myself. This shame that women hold, and it comes from generation after generation, whether we know it or not. This suppression of female pleasure and that it's wrong, it's icky, whatever, religious conditioning. But this shame that we hold around pleasure, if you're never going to confront that and allow that energy of that shame to move, you are carrying that into intimacy. You are just cock blocking yourself. You are cock blocking yourself from feeling the pleasure that you want to feel. So it's up to you, again, to do the work, the confronting, triggering work of, building a new relationship with your body, with pussy, with your erotic energy. Spread your legs. Look at pussy in the mirror. Mirror work is something that it was a very pivotal part of my journey in the beginning, and has been, of reclaiming my own pleasure, and something that I do with all, clients that work with me and in my courses, because it's about reclaiming this part of you that you expect to feel so much pleasure with, yet you can't even look at without shame, right? We need to feel that shame. We need to allow it to come to the surface so it can move and be released and be transmuted, so we can then feel the depth of our pleasure. But spread your legs. Look at that divine, beautiful portal. Start to touch her. Like, when have you touched her other than trying to force something to happen? When have you touched her other than perhaps with a powered toy? When have you touched her with no expectation other than to connect, potentially awaken, if you've, years of conditioning to high-powered toys, awaken, to have her feel loved and worshipped? When have you last done that? And yet you're sitting here, maybe not you, but you're sitting here complaining that there's an orgasm gap, that women aren't feeling the pleasure they want to feel, and you won't even touch yourself. You won't even, you'll sit there and perhaps rub and flick the bean and go, no, I'm not feeling anything. I can't feel anything. I need my toy, or I need, blah, 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 blah. No. You need to start devoting to yourself in the ways that you want from a lover. In what you want from intimacy, you need to start creating that with yourself. Start to touch yourself lightly. Bring her to life. Sit with the shame that arises. Become that goddess who is so turned on by her own presence, by just being with her own body, by just feeling her own body, by just looking at her own body. Become that woman who is in such devotion. I've said the word devotion a million times and I will say it again, but who is in such devotion to her body that she would never accept a man who does not want to meet her at those same levels. You are attracting the men into your life, the intimacy into your life, the connection, the orgasms or lack thereof. You are attracting that by who you are being. So instead of worrying about the orgasm gap, worry about, what am I going to do today and every day here forward that connects me to me, that prioritizes me in the ways that I want my man to prioritize me. What am I going to do? How am I going to touch myself, look at myself, be with myself, awaken myself, feel myself in the ways that I want my man to touch, feel, be, see, whatever, me? It begins and ends with you. The orgasm gap is just a very, like I said, a very trendy way of blaming the men, and women still never, you're not going to experience the pleasure, like the wildly mind-blowing, deeply connected, soul-expanding intimacy and sex that you want to feel if you are sitting here putting your pleasure in the hands of someone who may or may not want to meet you at any kind of level like that. If you are putting your pleasure in the hands of, well, men need to know. No, you need to freaking become this turned on awakened goddess so you don't accept anything less. That is how we close the orgasm gap. That is how we go from sex being male focused to partner focused, is from the women rising, the women becoming empowered, not by blaming the men, but being so connected to their own pleasure and reclaiming that for themselves. This is how we close the orgasm gap. By women awakening their body, awakening pussy, awakening to their erotic fire. This is how we close that orgasm gap. And I will forever, go on about this because, when you come to life and you realize it was me all along, like I had this in me. It was nothing, it all stemmed from me, and I had that power. When a woman realizes that and she comes to life and she turns on to freaking life, and therefore starts experiencing the orgasms, the pleasure, the intimacy that she desires, there is no orgasm gap. There is no such thing, because she doesn't attract men who don't give a shit about her. She would never even, it's like, ew, why would I even entertain that kind of a man? No. You close the orgasm gap by women becoming empowered in their pleasure, reclaiming their pleasure, awakening their body. That is how you close the orgasm gap. And in any moment you can choose, right from today, you can choose and say, I am going to start worshiping myself every single freaking day, devoting myself to me. I am going to spend the time connecting to me, looking at pussy in the mirror, feeling the shame that arises, touching her, stroking her without pressure, without expectation, giving her space and time to come to life. That is how you close the orgasm gap. And I hope this resonated with some part of you and you feel me and you are empowered and inspired to turn yourself on, and awaken yourself. So there's just no orgasm gap that even exists in your world, because you are orgasmic, you are turned on, you are orgasm. You are so free in your pleasure. It just doesn't exist for you to be stifled and suppressed and numb. Thank you. Thank you for being here. As always, I appreciate you watching, listening, wherever you are, Spotify, YouTube, and I look forward to our next episode next week. Bye.